Many of Jesus' claims to deity come from the Gospel of John. Some skeptics of the deity of Christ charge that John presents a disproportionately quote-unquote high Christology. They respond that if one is to examine Christ on the basis of the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they will be presented with a much quote-unquote lower Christology, to such an extent that they will not find support of the belief that Jesus is truly God. There are, of course, numerous problems that such an understanding would raise. Chief among these would be that if John is presenting Christ as God, while the synoptics are not, then the New Testament would contain a fundamental contradiction. Either the synoptic authors would be untrustworthy, or John would be, if not both. For the sake of this video, however, let's assume the possibility of such a contradiction. Is this the position actually reflective of the synoptic view of Jesus? Matthew, Mark, and Luke all cite John the Baptist's ministry as the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 40, verse 3. Isaiah records that the way would be prepared for the Lord, Yahweh. In citing Isaiah with reference to John the Baptist, John's ministry prepared the way for Jesus. Thus, if John is the one calling in Isaiah, Jesus then is the Yahweh who has come. For all of the charges that the synoptics present a quote-unquote low Christology, this equivocation of Jesus with Yahweh in the beginning of each of them is as quote-unquote high a claim as anything found in John's Gospel. Indeed, John himself makes the same equivocation. Much of what John writes to establish Christ's deity is to attribute divine attributes or functions to him that no mere creature could possess. We find similar instances in the Synoptics. Mark chapter 2 and Matthew chapter 9 tell of an instance when Jesus healed a paralyzed man, who had been lowered down through the roof of the house Jesus was ministering in. Jesus' response to their faith is, quote, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Based on the Old Testament, the power to forgive sins is one that is only attributable to Yahweh. In fact, this understanding is recorded among the crowd who just heard Jesus' words, quote, "He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" Jesus responds to this confusion with his proclamation, quote, "So that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, I say to you, get up, pick up your pallet, and go home." Jesus uses his physical healing of the paralyzed man to prove that he does, in fact, have the authority and power to truly forgive sin. Therefore, if Jesus does truly have such power, he must necessarily be Yahweh in his nature, fully and completely God. Before we leave this event, there is a crucial detail that's also worth examining. Jesus knew of the crowd's confusion because he knew their thoughts. This ability is reflective of Christ's omniscience, that he knows all things, a power that, again, is only possessed by Yahweh. Consider Genesis chapter 18, wherein Sarah expresses internal doubt at Yahweh's declaration that she will have a son. Even though this skepticism was internal, Yahweh knew of it, and he called her out for it. Quote, "For God sees not as man sees, for man looks at outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." For Christ to have this ability is another confirmation that he is truly God. During his earthly life, Jesus most often referred to himself as the Son of Man. Skeptics of his deity argue that he would have never referred to himself in this way if he believed he was God. Mark chapter 14, Matthew chapter 26, and Luke chapter 22 record the trial of Jesus before Caiaphas, the high priest of Jerusalem. Using Mark's narrative, he records Caiaphas asking about Jesus, quote, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus answers in this way, quote, "I am, and you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power, and coming with the clouds of heaven." In response to Caiaphas, Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. In doing so, he cites two Old Testament passages. The first is Psalm 110:1, wherein he claims to be David's Lord, who is given authority and dominion over all of creation by Yahweh's decree. The second is Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Jesus claims to be the Son of Man who communes with the Ancient of Days, and receives the everlasting kingdom of all nations and languages. The claim to be able to commune with God and to sit at God's right hand in all of God's authority was recognized among the Jewish people as indicative of the true divine nature of the Messiah. Caiaphas' response to Jesus confirms this. Quote, "Tearing his clothes, the high priest said, 'What further need do we have of witnesses? You have heard the blasphemy.'" Jesus nowhere attempts to correct Caiaphas' understanding of what he has just said, the same as he did in his proclamations of his deity to other Jewish crowds earlier in his ministry. Jesus' claim to be the Son of Man is not to affirm a lack of deity on his part. It is to affirm that he is the incarnate fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy, as recorded by the prophet Daniel. In this same vein, the Synoptics record Jesus' self-identification as the Son of Man to be the basis upon which he is the, quote, Lord of the Sabbath. This proclamation is one that Jesus makes to show that the Sabbath is under his authority. Therefore, it is his prerogative to grant freedom for works of sustenance and healing on the Sabbath day that no human religious authority could grant in Jewish society. The insinuation behind this is that Jesus is claiming to be the God who, quote-unquote, rested on the seventh day, and who passed on the Sabbath institution to the people of Israel at Sinai. As before, what if Moses, David, Isaiah, or any other human or created thing proclaimed themselves to be the, quote, Lord of the Sabbath? It would have been rightly recognized as both blasphemy and lunacy. Like the Gospel of John, the Synoptic Gospels also present Christ as being truly divine, truly God. If Jesus were mistaken or actively deceiving people in making these claims, he would have been a liar and a false prophet. As a result, his atonement would have counted for nothing. For Jesus to make these claims honestly, i.e., without sin, it demands that he understood his own nature as fully and truly God.